Reddit's real-life nightmares delves into spine-tingling true tales sourced directly from Reddit's most chilling threads. Encounter the supernatural and brushes with mortal danger as ordinary individuals share their harrowing experiences with the inexplicable and the macabre.
Colormestopid_. It's not a scary or disturbing story. Certain members on my dad's side of the family, there are 6 kids, including him, have some sort of like spirit/premonition type things that happen from time to time. It's not everyone, but my grandma, my dad, myself, my uncle, and one of my uncle's kids all have or have had something related to a spirit or premonition type thing happen, more than once. Usually once every couple of months. There are way too many stories to tell here, but 2 stick out in my mind. 1, a couple years ago my dad was getting ready for work and he was in the shower, and he kept having flashes of a war vet, dressed in full uniform. He didn't think anything of it. As the day went on, he kept having a weird sensation in his thigh, like when you're wearing a pair of pants with a wallet in the pocket and you sit down with the wallet still in your pocket, how uncomfortable it becomes. Like pressure almost. Same day, I was getting a weird feeling above my heart. Not a pain or pressure, just a feeling. I told my dad and he told me about what had happened to him that day. He immediately said, "We need to call Grandma, his mom." So we called her, and we told her everything that had happened to both of us. And he just looked me in the eye and asked my grandma directly through the phone. "Were you touching something today at the house, or looking at something today, related to great-grandpa?" Her father. She doesn't like to talk too much about him. Nothing bad, it just makes her upset because she lost both her parents very young, and had an especially close bond with him, and the phone went silent. After a few seconds she said, "Yes, I was looking through my old trunk and I picked up his wallet, his service awards, that are pinned above his heart when in uniform, and a picture of him. Dressed in full Air Force uniform. We didn't talk about that to anyone. But did discuss it when we saw her next. She is firm believer in this kind of stuff." The second one was when my dad was little. He shared a room with my uncle, which was in the basement, remember? 6 kids, anyways. The room was near the basement TV room where my grandparents sit and watch TV at night. One night my dad woke up just screaming and crying, so my grandparents went in to see what the hell was going on. My grandma hugged him and asked what happened and he said, "They all died, all of them, everyone. Off a mountain, someone help them please." My grandma assumed it was a bad nightmare and stayed with him the rest of the night, but he couldn't sleep. He was very, very upset. Next morning, she opened the paper and there was a horrible train crash in the mountains somewhere in South America. No one survived. Serviceingensun. Had a friend back in the day. She, her mom and her younger sister lived in a house. The family was well off, and owned a very large chunk of land. The mother and father were divorced, but the father lived in a house a few hundred acres away on the same plot of land. For about a year, the family had been noticing things out of place in their house, sometimes the TV being left on, drawers left open, food left out. They 2 sisters also talked about sometimes being tucked in at night, but they always thought it was their mom. Later finding out it was not. One day the mom and the youngest sister were pulling in their garage. The door into the house in the garage was open and there was a man standing in the door. He had snot pouring out of his nose and was breathing heavily. He went to go behind the car so the women could not back up, but like a smart woman the mom was having none of it, and she slowly continually backed up. The man started banging on the windows, but they got out of there, and called the cops. 2 police showed up, and entered the house. The man was pouring gasoline around the house, and shots were fired. The man and one of the police officers were shot, both lived. He was arrested. He had been living in their attic/crawl space. He got out of prison after, I think 7 years. The girls were pretty freaked out when he was released. Weird side note, the cop that was shot, okay, but if the bullet had been something like an inch to one side, it would have hit an artery. He apparently said that he believed an angle pushed him, to make that difference of where the bullet hit. Deleted user. One more, because I'll always remember this guy. I got lost on the bad side of town many years ago, and stopped at a Circle K to ask for directions. One of the guys standing outside the store came up to my window and said, "Hey, I'm going that way, I can show you how to get there," and me being the idiot 18-year-old female that I was said, "Sure." About 3 miles into the journey, the guy turns to me and says, "By now I could have raped and killed you. I'm only telling you this because it happened to my sister 2 years ago. You seem like a really nice girl and I would really hate to hear that something bad happened to you. Sorry to scare you, but if it saves your life then I've done my job. You can let me out here." A similar thing happened my first day on a door-to-door sales job. A guy told me to come into his house so he could get his checkbook, and once again idiot 18-year-old me went in. He went through a similar spiel. Don't ever go into someone's house that you don't know. It's really quite amazing that I made it to my age, now that I think of it. TLDR White Knights warning a naive 18-year-old girl about going anywhere alone with strangers. Cheesy_biscuit. My house is a church from the 1700s with a cemetery and all right out front. Needless to say, I have had a lot of creepy, scary shit go down. All of my following situations will be tied together at the end. Here we go. One day I walked up to my room and found my phone charger disconnected from the wall beside my bed. It was under all my dirty clothes and the wire had also been disconnected from the part that goes into the wall. Put it all back, no problem. This happened 3 consecutive days. On that 3rd day, I was putting it back into the wall beside my bed. I had some difficulty getting it into the wall and started hitting random things on my touch screen, felt the vibrations. When I finally looked at my phone, I had pulled up the call screen and dialed 666. I was in my upstairs bathroom a few summers ago. Right outside the bathroom there is a long hallway that leads to my parents' bedroom and a spare bedroom at the end. When I left the bathroom I looked down the hall and saw a man standing there. He looked at me for a few seconds, then he turned and walked into the spare bedroom. I had a dream that felt like it lasted all night long one time. The entire dream was the typical little girls in white dresses. They were standing beside my bed, watching me sleep. Me and my girlfriend at the time, few years ago, heard a distinct whistle in my bedroom. Nobody was ever home when we heard it. I think we heard it on 3 separate occasions. I was laying on my bed late one night, after midnight, with my head at the end where my feet usually are, just watching TV. Out of nowhere, the strings on my acoustic guitar strummed right next to me. I had to grab something in my room real quick one time and sat down on my bed. I read a text message. I felt an impression in the bed next to me, felt a small wind, and heard the air that would release if you flopped on a bed, all at the same time. To tie it all together, I invested in a digital voice recorder to see if I could pick up some frequencies that we can't hear. I asked about the whistling and heard no answer, no whistle, anything in person. Played the tape back and heard that same distinct whistle a few seconds after I asked. I then asked if they like my guitars because I heard them playing with it. Played it back and heard a female giggle, had that dream about the little girls. Went to the room where I saw the man walking and asked if there was anyone there. All hell broke loose. I heard a groan, heavy man voice respond to every question I asked. Nothing legible, more like grunts and ahas. When I asked him to give me a sign that he's here, like tapping or something, tapping began on the TV that was in the room. So I kept asking questions and gained information through tap responses. It was pretty crazy. Haven't used the recorder since. I was kind of freaked out. Thought I never found anything negative that would have explained the 666 on my phone. TLDR, live in a 300-year-old church and have had many creepy paranormal experiences. Deleted user. I've told this story in another thread and prefixed it the same. I don't believe in the supernatural or ghosts, but this all happened, I assure you. A few years ago me and my partner were alone in her parents' house for a fortnight and a series of very odd things happened. One night after we'd went to bed I woke up to use the bathroom. When I went downstairs, the cushions were strewn over the couch and some were piled up in the corner. Knowing my partner tidies each room before bed, it immediately struck me as odd but still needed to use the bathroom. I'd been sitting there a couple of minutes when I heard a loud knocking on the bathroom door. It's directly in front of the toilet, so I saw the door moving in the frame. 2 seconds, I explained to what I thought was my partner, but I got no reply. All I could hear on the other side was a rasping breath, loud and rhythmic. After I was finished, I sheepishly opened the door and of course nothing was there. When I got back upstairs, my partner had heard the knocking and wondered what I was doing. I explained and she was very creeped out. I think it was the next day we were in the living room when we heard a huge bang. It was massive, sounding like a gunshot. Immediately after the power went off, so after I turned the power back on we went to investigate. We found the dining room mirror had come off the wall and destroyed the power outlet below. It must have fallen vertically, but when we checked, the wire that attached the mirror was intact and the wall fixture was also fine. Again, this isn't supernatural, but neither of us could explain it at all. Over the next few days the dining room furniture would rearrange itself, chairs often pulling out whilst we were in the other room. We would hear the distinctive sound of someone sitting down. We'd hear people talking in other rooms, and of course they'd fall silent as you'd enter. Sometimes things will still happen, most often odd noises or items of furniture moving, oftentimes heavy things that take a couple of people to move ordinarily. CPTN spectacular. Maybe not the most disturbing, but it is the first that popped into my head. A few years ago I worked in a shoe store. It was not a busy store, so we would only have one person there to close. One night I was putting away a stock of shoes when the music, a CD of music sent by corporate, got really quiet, in the middle of a song. Then this old-timey song started playing, very quietly. It sounded like it was coming from a phonograph, being played on a very old and dirty record. There was a man singing in this very low, bluesy-sounding voice. It was so low that you could barely hear the words, but I made out God, Satan, evil, kill, etc. It lasted for about 20 seconds, then the normal song resumed playing at the normal volume. I would hear this randomly while I was closing throughout the next few months. Always during different songs, and even different CDs. I found out that another girl I worked with had also heard it while she was alone. I honestly have no idea what the hell it was. Panda eats rage. I was 17 in high school working at a country club. The country club was in the rich city 20 minutes from home. To get home I drive just along the borders or mildly through Detroit, but it's honestly not bad. I notice at some point I'm being followed late one Saturday night. It's a long stretch on one main road, but the guy's keeping tabs on me. Even though there's 3 lanes and all are completely open, he always pulls behind me on a light. If I change lanes he changes lanes. I'm getting closer to home and he's making all the same turns as me. I get one side street from home and take it, and start doing random turns and circles down the streets, sometimes looping the same block twice. I'm freaking out. He never once flashed his lights for me to stop or honked a horn or pulled up alongside me. Just kept following me. Being 17 and not knowing what to do at this point, I go home. I pull up in my drive, go inside, all the lights are off already. I don't turn them on and I peer out the window. He parks a house down and across the street. I freak out, wake up my mother, she calls the police. The guy gets out of his car, looks at our house, looks around and then begins walking a few houses over, a few houses back, and repeats this for a while. He's standing completely still with his back to us, staring at a house several doors down. The cops come and shine a light on him. Few minutes later cop comes to our door and we let him in. Turns out the kid was going to a party in my city, didn't know where it was exactly. Followed my from practically work because I was about his age and going in the right direction. Was completely drunk, and when the cops pulled up he had been pissing on the sidewalk. Edit, going to toss another thing here instead of making a new post. This isn't so much a single story as an ongoing thing. I have sleep paralysis. I have an extreme case of it. I can go weeks on end with every night having an episode. I have a great deal more hallucinations and they go longer than the actual paralysis. A great deal of the time it's the simple intruder in my room that I wake up to. In most cases I wake up, freak out, and after a minute or two I just go back to sleep. Now and again I'll have a bad episode and have to turn on the light for a bit just to get my bearings. Rarer still, I'll have a horrible one that causes me to get up and turn every light on in my house. They range from someone holding me down, touching me, grabbing my leg, to hearing voices and waking up to someone standing on my bed, standing in the corner, or perched somewhere staring at me. The weirdest and longest hallucination actually involved me waking up and eventually sitting up to look out my window as I heard my car door shut. Someone was in the driver's seat trying to start it. I watched him for a good minute, wondering what was going on as I could barely keep my eyes open and make out a face. I snapped to and threw on some pants and ran outside to find out no one was there. Perfect. I think I have to put this story down even though this will be buried. Back in 2005, I was 21 maybe 22 at the time and went to see a movie with a friend of mine. We got back, dropped him off at his house and went to Min, it is 0.3 miles I just looked. I got home, walked inside through the garage, my step-brother told me to call my brother, and someone knocked on the door. It was my friend. He arrived at my house roughly 45 seconds after I drove there. He was holding his son who was only 3 or 4 months old, and he was blue. I stood for what seemed like forever then started yelling for my parents to wake up, both were nurses, burst into their room, screaming to wake up and the entire house comes running out to me and my friend with his dead son. I was on the phone with 911 for about 35 minutes while my parents and brother performed CPR, the ambulance was outside with him after that for another 25 minutes, and then I drove them to the hospital. I sat with them for 3 hours while the ER staff tried to save him. I had no words and could only be there with them. After they pronounced him and went through some questions, the police followed us home and ransacked their house collecting diapers, clothes, etc. as evidence. I wasn't until about 9 a.m. that I went home and 11 a.m. before I fell asleep. It took about a week for me to feel normal again, but worse was my friend. She dressed their son's teddy bear in his clothes and pushed it around for weeks because she couldn't cope with the loss of their son.